made the run of Mr. Petty, and he staked. Do you remember the Petty Hardware on Main Street?
Yes, ma'am.
Well,
I've heard of it. I don't remember it.
Well, that's a long time ago. And my father, if you ever see the picture, you'll see him standing out in front with Mr. Petty with a little black mustache and a little derby on his head. That's where they came together. And Mother and Mrs. Petty stayed in Dodge City until they were settled.
Mm-hmm. Mrs. Eley, where were you born?
I was born, they staked a claim out here 2.5 miles north of Britain. And Mother had to take her housekeeper out there, and he built a 5-room house and a sort of a dugout thing. And they lived there had to live there 3 months to make it, legal. So.
Mm-hmm. When were you born? When's your birthday?
It was 96. I'm 87.
What month and day were you born?
January the 20th.
1896.
1896.
Mrs. Eley, what's your full name?
Laura Viola Barker Eley. You want it all?
Oh,
I've been married twice. I married Dr. Barker first, and he passed away, and about 7 years later I married Dr. Eley. And then he's been gone about 11 years, so I've been a widow since.
Who is your father?
My father?
Yes, ma'am.
George Alexander Todd.
Where was he from?
He was from Ohio. He came out from Ohio.
Mm-hmm. Who was your mother?
And my mother was Sarah Margaret McPherson. And she was from Ohio also. They lived near Salineville on a lovely old farm. My mother did.
Mm-hmm. How come they came to Oklahoma?
Well, they just decided they're more profitable. They wanted to come west.
What kind of work did your father do?
He was in the lumber business, the ice business, and then the bank. He had several businesses. He was a thrifty man.
Did he make the run of '89?
Yes, with Mr. Petty.
Did he ever talk about the run?
Oh, yes. He'd tell us a lot about it.
Do you remember any stories he said?
Yes.
He told?
He said when the gun went off and they started, he said there was a spring wagon with a couple in it, and the lady almost fell out. And he just reached over and pushed her back in the back of the whatever there wouldn't be a buggy. It was a
the bed of the wagon.
Just gave her a push and pushed her back there, or she'd have fallen out. I remember him telling that.
Where did he begin?
Where did he begin?
From the run. Did he come from the north or the south?
He came from Ohio.
I mean, did he start up the northern edge of the unassigned lands?
He came first to Guthrie. No, he came first to Perry. And the Perry house is still standing on the corner with the hitching post with Todd on it. It's right on the corner. It used to be a He had a whole block there, but it's all built up now.
Is this
Except-
in Perry?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And then he went to Guthrie, and Ollie was born in Guthrie, but they didn't stay there very long. And he came on down to Oklahoma City.
How come he came to Oklahoma City?
Well, he thought it was a upcoming part of the state,
Mm-hmm.
and he staked quite a bit of land here. He staked where the railroad was, and he finally gave it to them so the Rock Island could go through there. He gave that to them, and then he staked where the bank building was on, let's see, what was that bank building? And Mr. Colcord begged him to go in and build the other half of the building. That building was just half built, you know. And Mr. Colcord begged him to go in and build the other half with him. But he didn't want to. He wanted to go buy a ranch, which he bought down at Ellick, Oklahoma, out from Ellick, Oklahoma. And the railroad ran a spur line into his place because it had an enormous broom corn factory there.
Where was the ranch?
It was out from Ellick, Oklahoma.
How far is that from Oklahoma City?
Oh, I wouldn't know. Would you, George?
It's not more than about 30 miles, I'd say.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'd think it was further than that.
Maybe 40.
I'd think Ellick was further than that. We have to look on the map.
How long did you stay in Perry?
We stayed there quite a little while, and that's where he made quite a lot of money there.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any childhood memories of Perry?
Hardly. I was the youngest. If my oldest sister was living, she could really tell you a lot.
What about Guthrie? Have any memories of Guthrie?
Guthrie?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, slightly.
Do you remember what Guthrie looked like as a child?
Well, wasn't much to it. Very small place then. And we lived in a little yellow house on the corner. My dad always saw to it that we had a nice home, because he was in the lumber business and he could build them himself.
Do you remember moving to Oklahoma City?
Yes.
Tell me about the trip.
Well, we came on the train, but my daddy drove down. He drove the big Surrey, and that he'd ordered from St. Louis because it had rubber tires on.
Mm-hmm.
And he drove that down with a pair of horses, beautiful black matched pair of horses. And we came on the train.
Mm-hmm. Do you remember the chores you did as a child around the house?
Chores?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, I tell you, I got a quarter a week for my allowance. And boy, I stretched that quarter like you've never seen. I had to get that quarter, I had to put all new paper in the kitchen cupboards first. I worked all morning. Then she gave me a quarter allowance.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'd walk to town, which was from 16th and Lee. I walked to town, And then I'd go into the old Roach drugstore, which was an old store, but a most important one then, and spend 10 cents and get me a chocolate nut sundae. That was my treat.
What did the inside of the Roach drugstore look like?
Well, it wasn't very fancy. Wasn't very fancy. And it had, oh, those old iron-back chairs, you know, seat, old wooden seat about like that, and an iron thing at the back.
Kind of an ice cream.
Uh-huh. Ice cream deal.
Yeah.
Ice cream deal. And I'd sit there and eat that chocolate sundae, and then I'd walk home.
Did you know Mr. Roach?
Yes.
What was he like?
Oh, he was a tall, slender man. Very nice. Very nice man.
Now, was it a drugstore or a general store?
It was a drugstore.
Drugstore.
Uh-huh. But they had the fountain there. And about 3 tables. And then, of course, along the fountain you had stools. You wanted to sit there.
Did you know Henry Oberholzer?
Yes. And I knew his little daughter very well, played bridge with her all the time.
Henry Ione. Can you describe Mr. Oberholzer, what he was like? What kind of man he was?
Oh, he's been gone so long. He was gone when we used to play bridge all the time. But I well remember them, and I remember their house was so beautiful that Henry Ione took part of the upstairs and made an apartment out of it, and closed the parlor and everything downstairs. And it was a very elaborate furniture. That old French stuff all covered in brocades and things of that sort.
Well, that's a museum now, that house.
What?
It's a museum now.
Yes, I know. I know it is.
What kind of personality did Mr. Oberholzer have?
Well, now, I just don't remember.
Mm-hmm. You say you lived at the corner of 16th and Lee.
16th and Lee.
How far was it to walk downtown?
16th and Lee to Main Street.
Mm-hmm.
Quite a little walk. I've got the picture of my house in there if you want to see it.
What did downtown look to you?
Like then?
Mm-hmm.
Not much. And there were so many saloons. My mother'd hardly let you go downtown alone because there were so many saloons in the basements and it smelled like a brewery.
Were the streets paved?
I believe Main Street was.
Mm-hmm.
Seems to me like there was just one street paved, and I remember the first streetcar that I rode on. It was one Sunday. My sister and I, Olive, we had a nickel to put in our Sunday school collection, and we decided we'd take the streetcar ride down. Well, it went just as far as, that park. What was the name of that park down there? Just right down there and back.
Delmar Garden?
Delmar Gardens. Mm-hmm. And we got on there, and gee, the nickel just took us down. We didn't know how we were going to get back. So some man paid our way back. Gave us a dime to pay our way back.
Did you go to Delmar Gardens?
Delmar Gardens?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, we used to go down there on picnics.
Can you
beautiful.
describe the gardens, what they looked like?
Oh, they were beautiful. Beautiful. Stream ran through. and there's beautiful trees, and some of them would be enormous, but crooked. You could climb them, you know. We had a lot of fun down there. We took many picnics there.
Why'd they name it Del Mar Gardens?
Well, I wouldn't know. I have no idea about that.
Do you know why it closed?
Well, I don't know about that either. I just got too obsolete. People quit going.
Mm-hmm. Do you
But-
remember Statehood Day,
The statehood days,
1907, November 16th, when Oklahoma became a state?
yeah, who was that went up there and brought the seal down?
Let me see, they moved that in 1910. Governor Haskell,
Haskell.
yeah, brought it down to Oklahoma City.
Brought it down, just swiped it and brought the seal down to Oklahoma City.
You think they should have moved it?
Well, I don't know whether they should or not. It would have helped Guthrie out an awful lot.
Mm-hmm.
Had they kept it there. The consistory was there, you know. My father took his consistory there, because Mother and I went up with him and stayed a couple of days at that old Ione Hotel.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where he had to go to take his consistory.
Can you tell me about Statehood Day, about the big celebrations?
No, I really can't.
Where did you start to school?
Where did I start?
Yes, ma'am.
When I was at Emerson School on 6th and Walker.
Do you?
No, I didn't either. I first went out, it was east somewhere. Miss Etta was the principal. And and Ethel taught out there.
Ethel?
Ethel's my oldest sister.
Mm-hmm.
She taught there.
What was the name of the school?
Oh, now you got me. Was it Emerson? Seemed like that's what it was.
Mm-hmm. How large was the school?
Small.
Was it a one-room schoolhouse?
No. Had more than one room, but not very big. Wasn't a very big school. Because just that area out there went to it. And then from there we went to this, you know, down on, at the big one.
Now, is that Emerson? The one at 6th and Walker?
No, that was,
You go to Central.
that's Central.
Yeah.
That was Central.
But you went to Emerson School, though.
Yes, I went to Emerson first.
Mm-hmm.
That small school. And then later, when I moved on 16th, see, I went down to, well, as I graduated out of high school, I went down there to high school. Graduated out of grade school at Emerson.
Mm-hmm.
I went to Central to high school.
Who was your favorite teacher?
Oh, John Weldy.
What did he teach?
He taught math. He was a darling. And Mr. Porter was awful nice.
Was this at Central?
Uh-huh. He taught math too. and we'd all go skating out on when the ice would freeze over, out at Belle Isle, we'd all go out there skating.
What kind of games did you play in school?
Well, basketball, I played some basketballs all. Wore real cute bloomers. Oh. Oh, Lord.
Can you tell me what you did on Halloween when you were in school?
Halloween,
Yes, ma'am.
well, I always went out and I was scared to death. Just went out and got in the biggest mischief and just scared to death.
What kind of mischief you get into?
Well, I don't know. I remember one time I was going up on somebody's porch and this man chased me. Boy, I fell down and I scraped my knee on the pavement and about killed myself.
What do you remember of your early Christmases?
Early Christmas?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, our Christmases were always very beautiful. We had beautiful dinners, and they always cooked 2 big turkeys, and Dad wanted us to come and eat all week long, and Mother made the plum puddings in the 3. She had a steamer. She made the plum puddings and the lemon sauce and a hard sauce. And my dad always came home for lunch, and he sat at the head of the table and served everybody.
What was your father like?
Oh, great big, good-looking man. He was a large man, but very well proportioned. Steel blue eyes and white hair. I used to just think he was the prettiest thing in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Sit on his lap and comb his hair, and I'd think he was just beautiful.
What about your grandparents?
My grandparents? Let me see if I remember them. I remember when let's see, I didn't go back with Mother when grandfather died. I went back when grandfather died. But he was a very distinguished looking, fine looking gentleman.
Did you know him?
Did I know him?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. He was a tall, good looking man. And my grandmother, they wouldn't let me go back with her when she died. Mother went alone. We lived on 8th Street then.
Mm-hmm.
And so.
Were either one of your grandfathers in the Civil War?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I sure don't know.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of war, World War One.
Yes.
1917, 1918.
Yes, I remember that.
Did you do any work for the war effort?
I sure did.
What'd you do?
Oh, I wrapped bandages till I worked all day long. I'd just go to my church, either the church or Ida Stewart, who lives in the penthouse, of the Mid-Continent. She opened that big room up there, and we made wrapped bandages and everything until thank you. Until we could be dead. We'd take a sandwich.
How do you wrap a bandage?
Well, They had to be wrapped inwards, you know. They'd be about that long.
About 6 inches.
Uh-huh. That wide. And the raw edge, wrap them in. And then over.
What were they made of?
A gauze, kind of a gauze thing. We sent them overseas, you know.
Did you do any other kind of work for the war effort?
Well, I did that and my tongue hung out. I don't know.
What about knitting?
I never learned to knit. I could not knit. I tried my best to make it to knit and I never could learn. I couldn't pick up the stitches. I'd drop stitches all the time and I couldn't pick them up.
Did you do any work in the Red Cross canteen?
Yes. Down across from the railroad station. There was a little house there and I worked there all the time. And Mrs. Holly Wilson worked with me. We scrubbed floors, we wrote letters for people that came in, furnished stationery and stamps and everything like that, and gave them coffee and donuts. We made the coffee. We kept the place clean. We worked all day long.
Now, did you do these for the troops that were coming through on the train?
Yes. And they'd stop there and they wanted to come in, maybe have a letter written to their family. Well, some of them couldn't even write. So we'd write their letters and post them for them. Furnish the stationery.
About how many troops came through each day? Any
Well,
idea?
There'd be an awful lot of them. They didn't all cram in on us because they couldn't got them in. But we worked very hard at that place.
Where'd you meet your first husband?
Where did I meet him?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, Lord, where did I meet him? You remember where I met him?
Here in Oklahoma City.
Oh, yes, Oklahoma
It
City.
was Oklahoma City.
And he owned Mercy Hospital. I mean, Oklahoma General then, which was on 12th. Where was that?
12th and Walker.
12th and Walker. And then he sold that to the Sisters of Mercy for quite a bit of money. And then they operated there. He finally owned that whole block, and he sold it for close to $1 million. And he finally operated that whole, sold it to the Sisters of Mercy, and then they went and built the big one out there.
Yeah.
Which
What
is
was his full name?
Charles Edgar Barker.
What was he like?
What was he like?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, the most gentle, kind person. Very beloved. Everybody loved Ed. He was a very kind, lovely, gentle person. Nice looking. There's his picture. Right over there. And there's Price.
Her second husband, Dr. Eley.
What year did you marry Dr. Barker?
I married him in, was it 14? I was quite young. He was a lot older than I. I was only 18 when I married him. He was in his 30s.
Did your parents approve of the marriage?
My parents approved.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, they did.
Tell me about the Petty department store.
The Petty hardware store.
Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry, hardware store.
Oh, it was only hardware store we had here, and a great big thing. You never went any place. They had everything in that store. From dishes to silver to crystal. They had everything in that store.
Where was it located?
On Main Street, in the, it'd be in the main block.
When did Mr. Petty open that?
He opened it when he came down from Osage City, Kansas. When my dad came down with him.
Did they make the run together?
Yes, they made the run together.
Then they knew each other in Kansas,
Yes, Osage City.
Osage City.
Uh-huh. They lived across the street from each other there. And the queer thing, they lived across the street from each other here.
This is over on 16th Street?
16th. 16th and Lee. And of course he built the Skirvin Hotel.
Mr. Petty?
When
No,
it,
your father.
when it Mr. No, it wasn't, was it?
Pearl Mestis.
Yeah,
Skirvin.
Mr. Skirvin.
Uh-huh. Pearl Mesta lived over there across the street from me.
What was Oklahoma City like in the 1920s?
1920s. Well, there wasn't too much paving, I don't think. I don't know when that first streetcar ran. I really don't know.
Were there
So
many
I-
flappers here in town?
The what?
Were there many flappers here in town?
Flappers.
Flappers. The young girls in the 20s?
Oh, not too many.
Mm-hmm. Did you bob your hair in the 20s?
Yes, I bobbed mine. I sure did. I came home and I didn't want my dad to see it. Well, he said, just turn around, I want to see it, 'cause I know you've cut it. It was real long. I just whacked it off one day.
Why'd you bob your hair?
Well, I didn't want it long.
Were all the girls bobbing it?
Yep. They were cutting it right and left.
How short were your dresses?
How short were they? Well, average. They weren't too short. About there, maybe.
Because you know the flappers wore the dress above the knee.
Yeah,
They were daring.
yes. Well, we didn't wear ours above our knees, I know.
Because you were married then, weren't you?
I was married, yes, I was married in 18. See, I was married in
1914?
yes, 1914. I was 18 years old.
Where did you live after you were married?
Well, I first lived on 12th Street because he owned the house. And then later, my father bought one that Mr. Gardner had built on 16th Street, 16th and Klein, and my daddy bought that for me. He bought every one of us girls a home.
Do you remember the stock market crash, 1929?
Yes, I do. Barely.
Did that affect you and your family at all?
It didn't affect this state much.
What about the Depression, 1930s?
Well,
Did that affect you?
no, it didn't seem to. I think Oklahoma was the least hit of any of them.
How bad were the dust storms in Oklahoma City?
Oh boy, were they awful.
Can you describe one?
Well, you couldn't see your hand ahead of you. Terrible.
How long would a dust storm last?
Well, sometimes all day long. If they started, they usually lasted all day long.
Did you know Will Rogers?
Yes,
How well did you know him?
I knew him. My father was a very good friend of his. And Olive, my sister, went over there to Will Rogers' ranch to visit. He had a house party and he asked her over. And that's the only time I ever saw my father cry. We were in Colorado Springs at our summer home, and this extra came out. And it was the death of Will Rogers, where he and this man had blown,
Wiley Post.
Wiley Post had blown and crashed.
Did you know Wiley Post?
No, I didn't know him. But my dad just stopped the car and put his head down and just cried and cried. He loved Will Rogers.
What was your first reaction when you heard about the attack on Pearl Harbor?
Well, they're like, I've never trusted the Japs yet. I don't trust them either. And they're taking over the West Coast practically. Building banks, giving lower interest rates, doing everything.
Did you do any work for the war effort in World War II?
I'm sure I did. I don't think it hit us as hard as the first war, though. I don't think anyone worked as hard. And I remember we had to give up all our aluminum pans and things like that, If we had spare tires, we'd bought a whole set of new spare tires, and we had to give those up. And they didn't do a thing to them, put them down there in a dump and just let them rot out. Wouldn't do that again either.
Let me regress just one moment and ask about Armistice Day,
Armistice.
when World War I ended, November 11th, 1918.
Well, I remember it was very joyful, and that was about all.
What about when World War II ended?
Well, the same way with that. But as I say, World War II didn't mean as much to people as World War I. We were livid over World War I.
Do you have any questions?
Yes,
You remember when
yes, he organized the Independent Oil Association,
What was his name?
George Alexander Todd.
Okay, that's your father.
Hmm.
Okay.
He organized the Independent Oil Association, was the first president of it. And
The refinery business that
yeah, he owned
was
the
in?
first Oklahoma refining company here. It's still operating. Enlarged a great deal, and he built the Cushing refinery and the Ponca refinery and sold them to Henry Doherty. Quite a bit of money. I don't remember how much.
Did you know Governor Marland?
Yes. Been to his home.
Can you describe him?
Well, he was not a real tall man. Then they had a gate entrance where you had to go through that to get into the house.
That's in Ponca City?
Yes, Ponca City. See, when Dad built that refinery up there, they rented the house here to a banker, or else let him live in it, just to have someone in the house, to count the insurance and all. And they went up there and rented a house to be with Dad while he was building that refinery.
Did he sell that refinery to Mr. Marland or to Mr. Doherty?
Henry Doherty
Henry Doherty.
bought both of them.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that was wasn't that the forerunner of what is now City Service Oil Company?
That's City Service or Conoco?
Is that
City
city
Service.
is that city service? I don't know.
Because City Service at one time was ITIO, was the Indian Territory Illuminating Oil Company. And
I know City Service had a an article written by Ms. Eley's father in one of their house organs. Do you remember that article? They showed a picture of grandfather. He was in one of their publications that they published.
There was a whole page of him in the paper
Where he
one
was
time.
referred to as one of the Arabian Nights in the Oklahoma oil, early Oklahoma oil.
Oh, there was
Man.
there's a lot of write-ups about him. But there was, remember the big page picture when he had that beautiful animal?
Mm-hmm.
He had a pair that took the prize at every place they were showing. These big Belgian horses. He had a pair, matched pair, and there was a whole page picture in the Oklahoman about him with his horses.
what year was this?
Oh gosh, I don't know. Way back when he lived when he had the ranch at Bradley.
You mentioned that he staked a claim north of Britain.
Yes.
When was this?
Well, it's when the thing opened,
This is in the run of '89?
89, and that's where I was born, 'cause Mother had to live out there 3 months to.
What kind of house did you have on the farm out there?
We had a 5-room house, and very nice. He built it. He had it built, and we had a dugout. because every storm that came up almost blew you off the face of the map. And I said, that's why I'm scared of storms, I guess. We lived in the dugout. Mother'd say, come on, girls, let's go to the dugout.
Mm-hmm. What kind of chores did you do there at the farm?
Well, I didn't do anything. I went to Edmond to school, and we had a little pet pig that followed us the whole time. That little old pet pig went everywhere we went. We went to school, he went. He come back home, but he took us to school.
Mm-hmm. Well, Mrs. Eley, I think we have a good interview.
Dad was a great man, I tell you.
When did you marry Dr. Eley?
Where did I know Dr. Eley?
When did you marry Dr. Eley?
I married him about, 7 or 8 years after I lost Price. And the reason I knew him, see, he was a gastrologist, head gastrologist at St. Anthony, and taught over at the university too. And so I took Ed to see him on account of his stomach. He didn't have any acid. I had too much, and he didn't have any. So we went to see Price Eley about that. And that's where I met him.
Mm-hmm. When did you lose Dr. Barker?
When did I what?
When did you lose him?
Leave him?
No, when did he die?
Oh.
Dr. Barker.
Oh, gosh.
About 1948, I believe it was.
Was it that?
I believe that was in 1948.
And I
And I
married,
believe you married Price about 1955.
yes, about 7 or 8 years afterwards. He lost his wife. And he was determined to marry me. Regardless, I wasn't going to marry him. But I did.
What's your favorite childhood memory?
My favorite childhood memory?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, I believe when my brother bought my roller skates. I had the sweetest brother. And he died on the West Coast. He'd been up to see his wife. She was in the hospital. And he fell dead as he came down the steps. But he brought me a pair of roller skates, and I remember I sure got a licking that night.
How come?
Well, 'cause I stayed out roller skating too long. It was plain dark when I came in.
How old were you?
Oh, just a little old kid. Probably. I don't know. But I know my mother had a fit. I wasn't in there when dinner was served. I was out roller skating everywhere.
As a little girl, what do you remember about your mother's kitchen?
About my mother's kitchen?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, I remember one later better, when I broke all of her Haviland plates. The floor was all white tile. Great big kitchen. I know it was all white tile, and they just washed it. And I went over to borrow all of her Haviland plates because I was having a party. I didn't have enough china. So, went scooting out there, and my feet went right out from under me, and the plates went everywhere, and every one of them broke. Now that's what I remember most.
Was this after you were married?
Yes. And before that, I'd always run home to, if a storm looked like it was coming up, you know, we had so many cyclones and everything then, I'd run home as fast as I could to Mother and I'd say, Mother, is it gonna cyclone? No, of course it ain't gonna cyclone.
Well, Mrs. Eley, I want to thank you.
Well, you're welcome. What does that go to, Perry?
Well, it goes to the Oklahoma Historical Society
Uh-huh.
by the Capitol building.
Yes.
Well, that's very